After a head injury, she forgot who her husband was. You know what they say, love conquers all. You can find incredible stories proving that love defies all odds, but this one takes it to the next level. Laura Faganello decided to share her personal, powerful, and heartwarming story with the world through the power of social media. After overcoming a traumatizing and life-changing obstacle in her life, she wanted to inspire others. Laura shared a little piece of her love story with her Facebook friends and then told the complete story on the blog Love What Matters. After sharing her story, people all over the world fell in love with Laura and her boyfriend the same way she did, twice. This is her incredible story. To understand this magical story, it's important to know a little bit about the people we're talking about. The couple in question is Laura and Braden Faganello. The married couple is from Victoria, British Columbia, and they proved to the world that their love is so strong that it can get through the most difficult times. Even though they're happily married and going through life together as husband and wife, there has been more than one occasion throughout their relationship where they have been complete strangers. In fact, the first time they spoke, they never even met in person. I guess that's pretty common these days thanks to online dating. So let's take it back to the start. Braden was serving in South Africa through the Church of Latter-day Saints back in 2015. Laura had no idea who Braden was, but she knew his cousins. Those cousins of his thought that Laura would be perfect for him. They asked Laura to write Braden a letter and even gave her his address from across the world so she could send it. But Laura wasn't interested. She was getting ready to visit her mom and dad in Brussels, who were also stationed for missionary work of their own. Then Laura was headed for Spain to study abroad, and that was going to take up a large amount of her time. She just didn't have time for love right now. Even though Laura didn't necessarily need a boyfriend at that point in her life, she also knew she had nothing to lose. She finally decided to write Braden a letter but chose to use her home in Victoria as the return address, as opposed to her parents' house in Brussels. That way, she wouldn't be focusing on some guy while she was trying to enjoy her busy summer with her parents and the summer program. As it turned out, Laura completely forgot about Braden and the letter she sent him. That was until her brother gave her a call in Europe with news from home. He was still in British Columbia. Laura's brother called her on her birthday. He wanted to wish her a great day, and while he had her on her phone, he let her know that she got a letter from a guy named Braden. Not only did Braden wish her a happy birthday, but he was intrigued by the woman on the other side of the paper. He wanted to impress Laura and learn more about her. Luckily, he managed to impress her with his wit and charm. When Laura described his birthday letter, she said it was the funniest thing I'd ever read. That's when she decided to send the missionary another letter. She wanted to know more about him too, but this time she put her current address on the envelope. It didn't take long for Laura to realize that sending Braden a letter was one of the best decisions of her life. They started talking all the time, and for the next 8 months, Laura and Braden were sending letters back and forth to each other. I know what you're thinking, why letters? Well, both of them did indeed have cell phones, but they thought that letters were more romantic. They decided to continue with the letters and not call or FaceTime each other either. However, in addition to the letters, the pair opted for one email a week. In her blog, Laura mentioned that her happiest days were the one where a letter from South Africa appeared in my mailbox. Even though South Africa and Europe felt like worlds apart, Laura and Braden's living situations were temporary. In fact, within 1 month of each other, they both moved back to Victoria. Now they can finally see each other in person, and after talking for months on end, they were excited about their first meeting. It was everything they could have ever dreamed of. By January, Laura and Braden were officially dating. As February came around, the couple grew closer and said "I love you" to each other. Things were moving fast, but their connection was undeniable. As April was approaching, Braden popped the question and asked Laura to marry him. 3 months after Braden proposed, the happy couple planned their wedding and were ready to exchange vows. Their wedding was in July, so they became husband and wife on a beautiful summer's day. They got to celebrate their special day with family and close friends. It was a gorgeous day that Braden would never forget. The new couple didn't think anything could mess up their joy. They had no idea that their life and marriage were about to change forever. After 9 months of marital bliss, both of their lives turned upside down. Sadly, an incident would cause Laura to lose all memory of her married life. So what exactly happened that caused Laura to lose her memory? A couple of days after Laura completed her last college exam that year, a family friend asked if she would help her with something. They were getting ready for some kind of event and wanted to make sure the place was ready. They needed Laura to help them deck out the tent, and she was happy to help. That day took an unexpected turn. The wind was really strong and the tent wasn't helping at all. It didn't cover anything. All the balloons were popping and all the glasses were shattering. There are a few details from that day that have been ingrained in Laura's brain, and she probably won't forget them for the rest of her life. One aspect she remembers so clearly is that 3 women were having a hard time trying to ensure that the support poles won't fall down. Laura was able to see that the pole wasn't placed properly, but she also remembered the coordinator that was there helping them. That's why Laura assumed this was intentional and that everything was under control. She really didn't think much of it until it was too late. I think you can guess where this is going. As they were getting ready for the event, Laura was asked to decorate the tables inside the tent. She was hunched over the table trying to make everything as beautiful as possible. That's when she distinctly recalls hearing the woman closest to her gasp. She knew something was happening, but didn't even get the chance to react. Before she even knew what was going on, she heard and felt a huge thump over her head. The tent's support pole crashed down and landed on Laura's skull. Laura immediately put her hands on her head and tried to figure out what just happened. Thankfully, Laura was initially conscious when the pole hit her head, but she soon felt the room starting to spin. That's when she began going in and out of consciousness. At this point, it wasn't long before Laura would forget where she was and how old she was. That's when her life completely changed. In her brain, Laura was still 17 years old. The only thing she wanted was for her parents to come get her and take care of her. Unfortunately, she had no recollection that they moved to Brussels 3 years earlier. Laura's mind wouldn't stop spinning and she had no clue what was going on. As you probably have guessed, the pole that hit Laura's head caused severe damage to her memory. It was like Laura had no knowledge of her current life. It was like everything she had vanished with one thump. Not only did she believe that she was still a teenager, but she didn't recognize some of the people surrounding her. Her whole life became foggy and sadly, Laura had no memory of her wedding day. Confused, Laura didn't even understand that she was old enough to be married, let alone married to Braden. After her injury, she had no recollection of her husband. She said that she'd never met that man in her life. Since Laura's injury brought her mind back to age 17, Braden was a complete stranger to her. As heartbreaking as that was, Braden still loved Laura and thought of her as a wife. Her family wanted her to get back to regular life after the memory loss. In theory, that sounds like a good idea, but it was terrifying for Laura. To Laura, she was a 17-year-old girl waking up to a man she doesn't even remember meeting. In her blog, she noted that there were times when she would wake up in a rush of panic because she was sleeping next to a stranger. When Braden woke her up with a smile and good morning, it kind of freaked her out. Laura was understandably overwhelmed by this entire ordeal. She couldn't even make it to the bathroom in time to throw up. The whole situation was way too much for her. Like some random man was going to convince her that she supposedly had this unknown life. However, the facts were staring right at her. She knew her stuff was on the vanity right next to Braden's. She also noticed their wedding album sitting on the coffee table and she was wearing a wedding ring. All the puzzle pieces were there, but Laura still couldn't put them together and form a complete picture. I mean, her life after age 17 was forgotten. To make the situation even more difficult, this happened to Laura regularly. Every single day, she woke up next to a stranger and had no idea who he or she was. She couldn't remember her life after high school and how she even made it to this point. Most days, Laura woke up with tears streaming down her cheeks. Other days, Laura would wake up screaming and scared. As terrifying as it was for her, imagine how devastating it was for her husband. On his lucky days, Laura woke up not feeling like she was in immediate danger. Those mornings made Braden so happy. It made him so sad when his wife was terrified of him. Sadly, Laura's amnesia wasn't exactly temporary, and sadly, her memory didn't return after a couple of weeks. Instead, Laura spent the next 2 years living a life of misery. She was always scared and on edge. She barely knew who she was, let alone the strangers around her. To make matters worse, Laura began experiencing physical pain in addition to her mental and emotional trauma. When the pole fell on Laura, it caused serious damage to her spinal cord. That led to extreme headaches and back spasms. She would wake up in the middle of the night with a lot of intense pain. Braden took her to the ER often and really hoped someone could help her. Unfortunately, it was just part of the injury. Due to the extreme pain she suffers daily, Laura couldn't function like a normal person. That meant she had to leave college before she had the chance to graduate. The worst part is she had to give up her dream of becoming a teacher one day. Things were getting even more depressing. If forgetting big moments in life, including her wedding day, wasn't bad enough, Laura also lost her ability to read and write. There were times where it was hard for her to speak in complete sentences. Laura did try to contact the company in charge of the event that ruined her life, but they didn't take responsibility for the safety mistake. Laura was too exhausted to fight and got no compensation for her situation. With medical bills piling up, Laura found herself in a tough situation. On top of getting no compensation, Laura needed to leave college and was forced to leave her job because she couldn't function. Laura just felt like everything in her life she couldn't remember was falling apart. In addition to all of the pressure Laura was feeling, she had to come to terms with a couple of things, mainly that she was a married woman. Even though her husband was a stranger to her, she was still his wife in the eyes of the law. For someone who can't remember anything after the age of 17, it was a bitter pill to swallow. As the days passed, Laura started learning more about her life before the accident. She really just prayed for the best. She dreamed that she might wake up one day and her memory would come back. She thought maybe there's a chance she'll remember everything that she forgot. Sadly, that never happened. Laura couldn't remember how things were before the injury. Not only did she forget Braden's letter or that they got married, but she forgot how happy she was with him and how much she loved him. Laura didn't want this life. All she wanted was to be with her parents, her old friends, and her old life. Braden obviously noticed his wife was terrified. He knew the situation was eating her up, he just didn't know what to do about it. It was so hard for him to watch his wife jump whenever he would slightly touch her, and she looked at him as a stranger. After all, in her mind, he was one. All he wanted was for things to go back to normal. He didn't know what else to do but to hope that she would remember their beautiful romance and how much she adored him. He knew that was a lot to ask for, but he just wanted his wife back. He prayed for some kind of miracle. A few months later, Laura and Braden's relationship finally reached a turning point. The more time Laura spent with her supposed husband, the subtle memories of the man came back. She still couldn't remember or feel the love they shared, but she started to know that there was a connection there. Plus, she knew for a fact that they got married. Understandably, this caused Laura to get even more confused. She knew she was supposed to love her husband, but she started to resent their marriage. She felt trapped whenever she looked at her wedding ring. She assumed that because she was married, she had to stay with him. Laura was in a difficult situation. She knew she had to make a decision, but she also didn't remember her life. She didn't know if she should stay with this man who clearly loves her, a man who she supposedly loved back, or if she should leave him because she doesn't know him anymore. Deep down, Laura knew that staying with him would be the right thing to do, but she felt like she was doomed to a life of lost memories if she did. Braden made her decision even tougher because of how much he cared for her. No matter how reserved she was, he never gave up on her. He continued to try to make Laura feel loved and cared for. She didn't want to hurt him. Laura got to a low point and knew she needed some kind of change to make her life less miserable. Even though she couldn't hold down a regular job, she didn't want that to prevent her from trying to live a relatively normal life. She started thinking about what she wanted to do before the accident happened. Laura and Braden's dream was to do their own photography and videography business. Laura decided to put all her energy into making the dream a reality. It turned into her passion project and all her efforts were focused on that. However, she had to take it slow at the beginning. Thanks to her head injury, it was difficult for Laura to focus on one thing for a long time. So when she started working on her passion project, she would only be able to concentrate for 15 minutes at a time. Then she would take a 3-hour break to recuperate because she suffered from extreme pain and tension headaches. Every time Laura worked, she would cry out in pain. However, she never let her pain bring her down. As soon as the tears dried, Laura continued to work as hard as she could. It didn't take long for her love of photography to come back. When she remembered how much she enjoyed capturing beautiful moments, she knew she made the right decision. 2 years after that fateful accident, Laura suddenly woke up with a new sense of self and positive energy. She wasn't going to let this difficult decision get the best of her. She knew the only way to move on with her life is to fight through the pain, so she took her life into her own hands. First, she enrolled in 2 college classes. She knew she wanted to graduate, so she went back to school. It wasn't easy. The work and tests were tough for Laura, especially with her injury. On top of the fact that her mind and memories were all foggy, Laura was having a difficult time reading and writing, but Laura was determined and didn't give up. Once she was focused on her classes and work, Laura realized it was time to make some changes in her personal life. She didn't want to continue being married to someone she doesn't know and doesn't remember loving. She didn't know what exactly would happen with Braden, but she knew what she needed to do. She finally worked up the courage to have an honest conversation with her husband. Laura went over to Braden, holding her wedding ring in her hand. It was time to tell him how she feels, but she was worried about how he would react. She had no idea how he would take it. When Laura approached Braden, he was working on their business, but when she told him her new idea, he couldn't believe it. Basically, Laura told Braden she wanted to date him again, which left him a little confused. But as soon as Laura explained the strange request, everything started to make sense. She knew it would take a lot of time and energy, but admitted she wanted them to fall in love again. Her mindset was, after all, "You know me, but I don't know you." Even though Braden didn't want to backtrack their marriage, he knew she was right. She deserves to fall in love and remember it. To make this plan a reality, Laura asked Braden out on a date. She wanted to pretend like they were going on their first date all over again, so they headed over to the mini golf course. When the pair reached the third hole, the two of them couldn't breathe properly because of how hard they were laughing. Laura realized how much fun she was having, and it seemed as though they were connecting again. It didn't take long for them to act like a real couple. They would go on drives, long walks together, and in the honeymoon phase of a new relationship. All Laura really wanted was to learn everything she forgot about the man she married. She had no recollection of his interests or the stories he once told her. Braden was more than happy to tell her everything once again as if it was brand new information, because to Laura, it was. Of course, this also meant that Braden had to hear all of his wife's stories again. Even though he remembers everything, he didn't mind. He was just happy that his wife was finally coming back to him. He left her cute little notes on the bed so that she'll feel loved and cared for. Plus, he even read Laura her favorite books before they went to sleep. A few weeks later, Laura noticed something about her relationship with Braden. Even though she still didn't remember him or their marriage, she realized she was starting to miss the little moments she did spend with him. When they weren't together, all she wanted to do was see him. She was thinking about him all the time, which is how many of us feel when we're falling in love. Laura found herself laughing whenever he was around, and she couldn't help but smile when he crossed her mind. She couldn't get enough of this man. She told everyone around how perfect he was, and she was so excited to fall in love with him again. Laura knew that this new relationship would take time to grow. She wasn't ready to jump right back into a marriage with someone she doesn't even know. She found herself going through the motions of this love. For starters, Braden became her best friend, which is a huge factor in a successful relationship. Next, the couple spent more time with each other. It was almost like she had a crush on Braden. However, it didn't take long for her to completely fall back in love with him, wishing to spend every moment in her life with him. In her blog, Laura noted, "Love is a choice, and I am choosing to love Braden." Laura knows that she'll most likely never get her old memories back, but she was able to accept it, knowing that she can make new memories and new feelings of love towards her husband. Falling in love all over again because you forgot how it happened in the first place isn't something most of us get the chance to do. Because of this second chance, Braden was able to keep the girl he fell in love with in his arms. Braden and Laura got their love story twice. If they didn't start dating again, do you think they would have fallen back in love? Or do you think the lost memories would have ended the marriage? Incredibly, the pair dated for the entire summer. For the happy couple, it was definitely the summer of love. Laura really did enjoy getting to know her husband, and Braden was happy to watch her fall in love with him again. They had such a great time together that as soon as summer was over, Braden had an important question to ask Laura. Even though she didn't remember their vows, Laura didn't want to live her life with no memory of her wedding day. So Braden proposed to Laura once again. As you probably could have guessed, Laura said yes. She was so excited about this new beginning. Even though Laura doesn't remember her original love story with Braden, she was able to create a new one. Even though he had become a stranger, she fell in love with him just as much as the first time around. She was blessed with a man who would have gone to the end of the world for her, so it's no surprise she fell in love with him again. This whole ordeal wasn't easy on Braden either. He really struggled with the fact that his wife didn't remember him. He had his moments where he questioned if Laura would ever love him again, but he wanted to make it work. When he took his vows and promised to love his wife unconditionally, he truly meant it. Now, Laura and Braden are planning another wedding. In Laura's mind, it's the first wedding and she can't wait to tie the knot with her husband. This stranger she couldn't remember has become the love of her life. She was ready to use this second wedding as a way to embrace their next stage of life together. After all, most of us don't get to fall in love with the same person twice. Now that they have the option to show off their love and commitment towards each other, they couldn't wait. The right person doesn't come around all the time. Their love is something nobody could ever take away from them. It's no secret that Laura's life took a dramatic turn after the accident. Everything changed and she couldn't remember anything. Her memories still haven't returned, but Laura has since gotten her life back on course. In addition to falling in love with her husband again, she was able to take her career on a new path. If the head injury didn't happen, she probably would have gone on to become a teacher, but she wouldn't have been as happy as she is now. Today, Laura can relax knowing that she created a thriving business that she's able to share with her true love. What could be better? Nowadays, Braden and Laura are running Faganello Productions, a highly successful videography company. Thanks to their personal experience and love story, the couple specializes in wedding ceremonies. They love showcasing the love two people share on their wedding day. They enjoy surrounding themselves with other people in love. It reminds them of their incredible story and how much they were able to overcome together. They went from strangers to lovers to strangers again and back to lovers. It was one crazy roller coaster, but at the end of the day, they ended up exactly where they belong, in each other's arms. After Laura told her story through social media and her blog, people all around the world have been able to read their heartwarming love story. Some people sent their condolences and felt sorry for the couple and everything they went through during these last couple of years. Others congratulated the couple for proving that true love conquers all. In fact, a lot of these people got inspired and started following the pair on social media. They want to keep up with them and see how their lives are going. You can see how madly in love this wonderful couple is. It's hard to believe that they went through some real struggles. True love is a hard thing to find, and once you find it, you should never let it go. No one knows where life will take you, but it's important to have someone who loves you by your side. Even if you do find a fairy tale ending, every relationship goes through hardships. In Laura's case, it was health-related and the circumstances were out of their control. After their amazing first wedding, Laura and Braden never thought their lives would flip completely upside down. Despite the devastating incident, Laura was able to fall back in love with her husband. She went through a lot with her memory loss, but this couple really proved that love will always defy the odds.